You won't regret it, I promise. Subscribe. My name is William Harris. I am 67 years old, and this is how I learned to vanish in my own home. That's a good hook, isn't it? A cruel one, but it's true. I watched myself fade like a stain scrubbed from porcelain, until only the shine remained, and the person was gone. Tell me, would you have sat there as long as I did? Would you have smiled? I live in a modest apartment a few blocks off Beacon Hill, a second-floor walk-up that announces every footstep with a complaint of wood. The radiators cough and hiss in winter. In summer, they sleep like old dogs. The windows look out over a brick alley where the trash barrels line up like soldiers, and where the morning smells faintly of yeast from the bakery at the corner. When it rains, the bricks darken to the color of coffee grounds, and bicycle tires whisper through the puddles. Boston is a city of muttered pride and polished shoes. It will not ask after you unless you insist upon being known. I used to insist. I did, once upon a time, when my first wife, Elizabeth, was alive and we still believed in the future the way children do recklessly, greedily. It has been 15 years since she died. I have a photograph of her above my desk, candid, taken on the porch of a Cape house we rented for a week one summer. Her hair is tucked behind one ear. She is laughing at something I said that I cannot remember, and I hate that I cannot remember it. Her laughter is a clear line on a page I can no longer read. Do you know that ache? The ache of some beautiful sentence you can never recite again? After Elizabeth, there was a long stretch of evenings spent entangled with the television glow, the stubborn ritual of single servings, the quiet, sturdy routines that keep a man from walking into the river. Then I met my second wife in a language class of all places. She wanted Italian for a trip to Florence. I wanted to wring something elegant out of my mouth again. She was lively, assured, with a shoe collection that could have filled a small museum. I will not give you her name yet. Does that make you suspicious? Good. Keep that in your pocket. Let's just say she had 2 children from her first marriage, both adults, both occupying that dangerous middle space where you are certain your cynicism is wisdom. Sunday dinners became our treaty with the week. It sounds pleasant, doesn't it? Roast chicken, salad with too much lemon, bread warmed in a towel-lined bowl. But it is at tables, I've learned, that wars of posture are fought, where the tone of a voice cuts chins lower or lifts them higher, where people in love perform their worst selves for the ones who know the lines. The first time they forgot to serve me was not, strictly speaking, the first time they forgot me. There are many ways to leave a man unserved. I arrived with a pie, blueberry. Old habit Elizabeth loved blueberry, even out of season, even when they were sour. I put it on the stovetop and kissed my wife's cheek, and she said, "Don't start nibbling, we have a head count." And I said, joking, "Am I in the head count?" And she smiled absently over my shoulder at someone else and didn't answer. Do you see the tiny sabotage? No one fired a shot. A smile confirms nothing, but a smile, placed carefully enough, can be a knife. The stepchildren, let us call them Olivia and Grant, arrived boisterous, late, smelling of sharp cologne and the froth of whatever they'd been drinking. Olivia worked in marketing, which meant she could humanize laundromats and make funerals trend. Grant worked in strategy, a job which, near as I could tell, was a long ride to the same place, whether you pedaled or not. When they hugged me, it was with the inscrutable politeness you reserve for someone who's recently lost weight or recently gained it. In the kitchen, my wife tilted her head to them the way a bird listens at a window. With them, she laughed quickly. Nothing had to earn its way. You've seen this, haven't you? The way a mother metabolizes her children's moods. Even when they are old enough to pay taxes, even when it costs her more than she knows. I set the table. It is a rectangular oak thing rescued from a consignment shop, with a shallow groove along the edge that catches crumbs and secrets. Plates, then forks, then knives. A simple progression, a small sacrament. I put my plate at the far end, facing the window, where I could look out past the herb pots and watch the swaying branches of the sycamore on the sidewalk. My hands remember the old rituals the way a tired priest remembers Latin. When we finally sat, something took the air. Perhaps it was the speed of youth, the velocity of their stories. They spoke in tumbling rushes that only they could follow, in phrases and out phrases, the grammar of a family I had not learned. My wife leaned in. Her bracelets made a small bright music against each other. The chicken came around, then the salad. The bread did a lap, torn and buttered. When the potatoes came, they went left instead of right. And then there was talk of vacations and a promotion and an ex who texted something cryptic. And the potatoes completed their orbit without docking at my plate. My neighbors ate. I watched. There is a particular indignity to sitting with your knife and fork aligned and your plate white as bone. It is like watching your name scroll by without landing on your stop. I said, quietly, "Could someone pass the potatoes, Mom?" Olivia said, which is not a word but an alibi. Then she lifted her glass. "To us," she said. "To the week we survived. To us," Gran echoed. "To us," my wife said, and looked over the rim of her glass at the apple of her own reflection. The rim of my plate caught the chandelier light and flared. Isn't it ridiculous what you notice when you're being erased? The thin halo of light around emptiness. It would be comical if it were happening to someone else. That's the trick, isn't it? Comedy is tragedy that has happened to a stranger. I could have reached across and served myself. I know that. I have hands. But do you understand that the reaching is the humiliation? The act of serving yourself at your own table after being bypassed is a small, loud indictment that says, "Look, you forgot." And to say that out loud is to risk being told you are oversensitive. And if there is a word I loathe, it is that oversensitive, because it turns careful observation into a defect. "You're quiet, William," my wife said, at last. There was a touch there, a gentle admonition addressed to the room. The potatoes paused their orbit again. They were a small moon waiting for gravity to decide them. "Listening," I said. "To what?" Gran asked. "The weather," I said. "It's coming in cold." I glanced at the window and watched my breath fog the reflection of my own face. They laughed. It was the kind of laughter that starts kind and then lingers a little too long, like a hand that should have been removed. Then Olivia leaned forward. "Mom said you went to that piano lesson. How was it?" "Embarrassing," I said. "But good." I meant both words. Olivia nodded in a summary way filed, dismissed. Grant began describing a new restaurant in Seaport, where the menu was printed on metal, and the cocktails arrived under smoke like small stage tricks. When he spoke, he watched his reflection in the blade of his knife. My wife touched his wrist to dote on a detail that did not require doting. "This is love too," I told myself. "This is what it looks like when we are no longer at the center." I am trying to be fair. Do you notice? It would be easy to paint them as villains because it flatters me, but they are not villains. They are simply unaware, and perhaps a little cruel in the way the comfortable are cruel. The world has applauded their every anecdote for 30-something years, and applause makes most people deaf. The potatoes reached me at last as a courtesy tour, and I took a spoonful that looked like an apology. We ate in a pattern that did not involve me. I said something about a baseball game, a modest observation about how the Sox keep leaving men on base, and it slipped into the soup of talk and sank without a ripple. If a word falls in a dining room and no one hears it, did the old man speak? After dinner, while the others bust dishes with exaggerated clatter, the clatter of people proving they are not above work, I stood at the sink and ran warm water over my hands for longer than necessary. The water steamed. The window over the sink was fogged, and when I wiped it with the heel of my hand, the street appeared imprecise, a watercolor come to life. Taillights. That sycamore now black against the navy skin of evening, the wet shine on the brick. Winter would come with its long, rehearsed suffering. I felt very old then, and not for the first time wondered how a man makes himself large enough to be seen without becoming monstrous. On the way home, because yes, I go home alone afterward. My wife stays in the house she owned before we married, and I keep my apartment. We have called it independence, and perhaps it is on the way home. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I did the unwise thing. I looked down while crossing in front of a cab, and the cab honked, and I laughed at myself for choosing death by distraction. The message was from a group chat the three of them had made months ago to arrange dinners and schedules. I had been added as a courtesy. Its name was Sunday Spread, a title I hated without being able to explain why. In the thread, Olivia had written, Earlier that afternoon, before I arrived, do we even set a place for W? He always eats like a bird. There was a laughing emoji. Ben Grant's reply, lol, standing room for elders. And my wife, my current wife, with her glossed compassion. Stop. He's sensitive. But yeah, don't fuss. 3 people I see every week. 3 strokes of a soft hammer. Is this where you tell me to grow a thicker skin? Or is this where you feel your own jaw set because you, too, have seen your name abbreviated to a single letter? I did the cowardly thing. I didn't respond. What would have been the tone? I closed the thread and told myself the tone is a weapon the young learn to wield early and the old are punished for using it all. At home, the apartment smelled faintly of laundry soap and the lemon oil I rub into the shelves on Saturdays. I hung up my coat and stood in the narrow hallway, suddenly unsure of where to put my hands. I have never liked being seen undecided, even by walls. On the desk, the photograph of Elizabeth waited with her porch laugh. I walked to it, palms still damp from the sink water that had become a nervous habit. I touched the top of the frame with one finger. You would have put a spoon in my hand, I told her. You would have stacked my plate before your own. The radiator clicked on from its slow sleep, sounding exactly like a polite knock at a door you cannot bring yourself to open. Above the sink, I keep a small shelf for mismatched things. A cork with the year of a celebratory bottle burned into it. 2 smooth stones from a trip I took with Charles years ago to Nantasket. A folded, yellowing index card with a recipe for blueberry pie in Elizabeth's hand. I took down the index card and read the ingredients and instructions, though I can recite them by heart, though I can measure them with my eyes closed. Butter the size of a walnut. A scatter of sugar, like first snow. That was how she wrote, like a person who believed that taste could be trusted to memory. I slipped the card back and thought, absurdly, that if I baked another pie, they might listen to me while chewing. You see the bargains we make? I will trade pastry for dignity. I will barter sweetness for silence. Another buzz from the phone. A photograph from the chat of my empty chair at the table, sent by Olivia, captioned, "Forgot to sit the elder statesman." There were 3 hearts. 3. I looked at the timestamp, sent after I left the kitchen to run water over my hands. Taken while I stood there listening to the sink. Had they laughed? Of course. And why shouldn't they? In their version, it's gentle teasing, the kind that keeps the air buoyant. In mine, it is one of 1,000 paper cuts you dismiss until your sleeve sticks red to your arm. I set the phone face down. The screen lit the table edge for a second, a small slab of cold light, then died. Outside, the wind came down the street like an old argument. The apartment was the right temperature for regrets. I don't know what I expected the first time I told you this. Sympathy? Contempt? A list of countermeasures? I have thought of them all. I have rehearsed the sharp, funny line that would make them gasp and then clap. The neat little speech that would rearrange the chairs in their heads. But neatness is not how families work. Families are the opposite of geometry. Nothing lines up, and the angles are not what they seem. In the bedroom, I changed into a sweater I prefer navy, moth-bitten, soft enough to remind me I am a person with skin worth touching. I turned on the television for noise and then muted it. I cooked 2 eggs in a small pan because the ritual soothed me, and I salted them more than necessary because sometimes taste needs to be convinced to come back. I ate them at the kitchen counter without ceremony. The fork ticked against the plate. The radiator exhaled. You're waiting for the twist, aren't you? For the moment when I slide a folder across a desk or take out a key to a house no one knew I owned. Not yet. First, we must sit in the ordinary cruelty long enough to recognize it. You can't map a trap if you don't know its hinges. When I climbed into bed, the city hummed its old lullaby distant siren, a door closing too hard, footsteps above me, passing from one room to another and back again. I have learned to love those noises because they say, you are not the only one awake. On my nightstand, the photograph watched from the dark. The porch laughter, now a thin glass rectangle catching faint streetlight. I picked up my phone once more, against my better judgment. I scrolled to the group chat and typed a sentence and deleted it and typed another and deleted it and finally sent nothing. Cowardice, prudence, some nights they share a bed. Instead, I opened a new note and wrote, next Sunday, bring your own plate. I don't mean a literal plate. Don't be dim. I mean a place. A claim. A small square of table that cannot be turned into a joke. How? I didn't know yet. But I slept with the sentence under my pillow like a child with a coin for a tooth. And I dreamed of a table with my name burned into the wood. In the morning, as I poured the first coffee, cheap, honest, the kind that scours the tongue, I heard the envelope slide under my door. Rent notice? Flyers? I bent and picked it up. White, thin, official, in that way plain things can be. Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the corner. My name, full, not abbreviated. The return address, a law office on Tremont I didn't recognize. That's all you're getting today. I stood there, coffee in one hand, the envelope in the other, my heart behaving like a much younger animal. I didn't open it. Not then. Tell me, would you have? The envelope lay on the counter all morning, between the sugar jar and the coffee rings. I walked past it like a man avoiding a mirror. Do you know that particular superstition? That opening something official might change the day? Might tilt the room on its axis? So I left it there, white and thin, and instead busied myself with the small, loyal chores. Rinsing dishes, folding towels, sweeping crumbs into my palm. Anything to convince myself the world remained stable. I told myself it was probably some mistake, a misaddressed notice, junk with a seal of authority. And yet, I couldn't help tracing the lettering of my own name, as though it had been written for the first time in years. Someone had typed it, but it felt handwritten in its precision. William Harris. Not W, not dad dash in dash quotation dash marks. Not the ghost at the table. I finally opened it just before noon. The letterhead belonged to Morrison and Blake, attorneys at law. I had never heard of them. The body of the letter was brief. Mr. Harris, we write to inform you that the estate of Mrs. Dorothy Campbell includes certain bequests requiring your acknowledgement. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange an appointment. No details. Just that. Dorothy Campbell. The name lodged in me like a pebble in a shoe. She had been Elizabeth's cousin, much older, a woman who never married, who kept a house full of clocks in Brookline. I remembered visiting once, maybe twice. Dorothy had served us sherry in etched glasses that smelled like furniture polish, and she had spoken in a voice trained not to tremble. The sort of woman who called everyone dear, but looked them in the eye like a magistrate. And now she was dead, and apparently she had remembered me. Why me? That was the puzzle. Elizabeth had been closer to her, but Elizabeth was gone. Maybe Dorothy had no one else. Maybe she simply disliked her own blood. That happens, you know. Families are not logical creatures. I slid the letter back into the envelope and placed it on the windowsill. The sycamore outside had begun to yellow at the edges, a premature whisper of autumn. The branches moved in the wind like hands reluctant to wave goodbye. That night, I lay awake and heard the upstairs couple argue, muffled shouts, a door slam, then the muffled thump of reconciliation. Their lives bled through the ceiling like water stains. I stared at the shadows on my own ceiling and thought of Dorothy's clocks, the relentless tick of them. I thought of Sunday dinners, of Olivia's mom, and Grant's knife mirror face. I thought of my wife's bracelets and her laughter pitched too high, tuned to their frequency. And then, without meaning to, I heard my own voice say aloud in the dark, "Your silence is a noose, William." It startled me. Where had that come from? But I knew. Every time I swallowed the offense, every time I laughed off the slight, I wasn't choosing grace. I was pulling the rope tighter around my own throat. The next day, I went for a walk along the Charles. The air smelled faintly of algae and diesel from the tourist boats. Runners pounded past me, their sneakers rhythmic, their faces set with the kind of determination youth mistakes for permanence. I watched them and thought, you are running toward the same wall I've already hit. I sat on a bench and took out my notebook. Yes, I keep a notebook. Small, leather-bound, pages gone soft with use. Elizabeth once told me, write things down, William, or else they vanish. At first, I wrote shopping lists and phone numbers. Over time, I began to write fragments of memory, overheard phrases, grievances too small to speak aloud but too sharp to discard. That day, I wrote, what is a man without a place at his own table? A ghost with a fork. What is silence? A slow suicide dressed as politeness. I underlined that twice. Then I wrote, "Enough." The word looked different in ink. It was no longer a whisper to a photograph. It was a contract with myself. That week crawled towards Sunday like a carriage dragging a coffin. Each evening I rehearsed possibilities in the mirror. You'd laugh to see me, an old man muttering at his own reflection, trying out tones. Firm, gentle, sardonic, furious. My face betrayed me. It sagged into weariness no matter how I pitched the words. But my voice, slowly, gained spine. One night, Charles came over. Charles, my old friend from the Navy days, retired now, still carrying himself like the deck beneath him is moving. He's a widower, too. He brought a six-pack and dropped into my armchair with the sigh of a man who has earned his size. "You look restless," he said. "Do I? You've been gnawing the same toothpick for 5 minutes." I hadn't noticed. I set it down. "Tell me something, Charles. Do you ever feel erased?" He gave me that long squint of his, the one that measures whether you're being dramatic or confessing. By who? Family. Always. He laughed, dry. "That's the family contract, isn't it? You sign up to vanish slowly. Some of us get better terms than others." I told him, haltingly, about the potatoes, the group chat, the empty plate. He listened without interruption, drinking his beer in small sips. When I finished, he nodded. "They don't respect you," he said simply. "No," I admitted. "So stop showing up." As if it were that simple. "It is," he said, "but it's not easy. Don't confuse the two." I thought about that long after he left, his words clattering around the apartment like a loose shutter. Saturday evening, my wife called. Her voice was bright, performative. "The kids are looking forward to tomorrow." "Are they?" I said. "Yes. Olivia's bringing that new salad she likes, the one with kale and pomegranate. Grant says he'll handle the wine. And me? What about you? What am I bringing?" There was the faint pause of someone balancing honesty against diplomacy. "Just yourself," she said finally. "That's enough." The irony stung so sharply I almost laughed. Enough. That was the word I had written. But she meant it differently. She meant, "Don't complicate things." She meant, "Don't assert yourself." "I'll think about it," I said, and let the silence stretch until she shifted and said she had to go. Sunday arrived with a pale sky, the color of unpolished silver. I walked the length of Charles Street before heading to her house. Antique shops displayed clocks, maps, china. I studied them through the glass. All those relics waiting for someone to assign them value. Isn't that what we all are, in the end? Objects waiting for a price tag we don't get to write. At the house, the table gleamed, the cutlery aligned like disciplined soldiers. The children arrived loud as ever. There was hugging, clinking, perfumed air. I sat at my end of the table, already rehearsing my moment. My hand strayed to my pocket where the notebook rested. One word waited inside it. Enough. And as the salad came around and the wine was poured, and Olivia began her story about some new campaign that turned laundry detergent into a lifestyle, I realized with a clarity that tightened my chest. I wasn't just rehearsing anymore. I was preparing for war. I did not speak that Sunday. Not yet. The words sat heavy in my chest like coins I wasn't ready to spend. Instead, I studied the faces around me with the scrutiny of a man about to leave a theater before the final act. My wife tilted toward Olivia, laughing with her mouth wide, but her eyes glancing left and right, alert to mood shifts. Grant gestured broadly with his fork, a man convinced the room needed his emphasis. And me? I was the chair at the end. The punctuation no one bothered to read. But inside, something different had begun. I wasn't numb anymore. I was listening to my own silence, and for the first time, it sounded like treachery. That week, I began a strange ritual. Each morning, before breakfast, I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment and spoke aloud. Not affirmations, God, no. I was never that type. Just sentences. Things I'd wanted to say, but swallowed at the table. Olivia, it is cruel to speak as if I am not in the room. Grant, I am not your audience. Stop performing. Don't you dare call me oversensitive. That word is a dismissal, not a defense. At first, my voice cracked. It startled me to hear it so loud in the still apartment. I'd grown used to muttering or simply nodding. But each day, my tone grew firmer, steadier, less apologetic. By Thursday, I sounded almost like myself at 40, A man who used to give lectures, who could command a room without shouting. Isn't it strange how quickly a person can rediscover his own muscles after years of letting them atrophy? My wife called midweek. "You've been quiet since Sunday," she said. "Have I?" "Yes." "Is something wrong?" "Plenty," I said. The pause stretched. I could hear her bracelets clinking through the phone as she shifted. "William, don't start inventing problems. The kids adore you." "Do they?" "They do. They're just young, lively. They don't mean anything by it. That's convenient for them." Another pause. Then, gently but firmly, "Please don't make me choose between you and them." "Why not?" I asked. She exhaled, exasperated. "Because I won't." There it was. The truth lay bare, finally. That night I sat at my desk with Elizabeth's photograph. I placed the unopened notebook beside it. My late wife's eyes caught mid-laugh on that porch decades ago, seemed to watch me, to measure me. "Did I fail you?" I asked the photo. "Is this what you'd think of me, Elizabeth? A man too polite to demand his own existence." The radiator knocked once, as if in answer. I opened the notebook and began to write again. Phrases, not essays. Small armaments. "I will not apologize for needing respect. Dignity is not negotiable. If I vanish here, I vanish everywhere." When I closed the notebook, I felt the faintest tremor of strength in my hands. On Friday evening, I met Charles for dinner at a pub near the Common. The place smelled of fried fish and malt vinegar, tables sticky with use. We ordered chowder and 2 pints. "You're practicing speeches, aren't you?" Charles said without preamble. I blinked. "How do you know?" "You've got that look in your eye, like a boxer shadow punching." "Who's in the ring, William?" "My stepchildren." "My wife." He whistled softly. "That's no ring. That's a minefield. I can't keep quiet." "Then don't. But don't expect cheers. You'll be fighting for yourself, not for their applause." "I know." Charles leaned back, studied me. "You're dangerous now," he said. "Most men your age go quiet. Once you start speaking, they won't know what to do with you." "Good," I said. The next day, Saturday, I found myself wandering Beacon Hill. The brick sidewalks were uneven, tripping me if I didn't watch my step. Antique shops displayed brass lamps, mirrors in gilded frames, and porcelain figurines staring out with blank patience. In one shop window, I saw an old metronome, wooden, with its pendulum arrested mid-swing. Something about it caught me. I stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming faintly. The shop smelled of dust and lemon oil. "That one still works," the shopkeeper said, seeing my gaze. "You wind it, and it ticks true." I bought it on impulse. When I set it on my desk at home and wound it, the tick-tock filled the room, steady as a heart. I let it run while I rehearsed my words. The sound gave me courage. Each phrase became a measure, each pause deliberate. No more stumbling, no more cracked whispers. But even as I prepared, doubts gnawed. Was I becoming petty? Vindictive? What if I was the problem all along, expecting reverence I hadn't earned? I thought back to Elizabeth, how she had always laughed at my jokes, always looked at me with that attentive gaze. Maybe she had spoiled me. Maybe what I was calling respect was just longing for worship. But then I remembered the group chat. Do we even set a place for W? The mocking tone. My wife's complicit. Stop. He's sensitive. No, I was not imagining. I was not oversensitive. I was underseen. On Sunday morning, I woke early. I dressed with unusual care. Pressed shirt, navy sweater, polished shoes. I stood before the mirror one last time and spoke aloud. Today, I will not be invisible. The metronome ticked behind me, marking the tempo. I closed Elizabeth's photograph in a drawer, not because I wanted to hide her, but because I wanted to carry her inside me, not on the wall. Then I slipped the notebook into my coat pocket, my arsenal. When I stepped outside, the air was sharp, smelling faintly of wood smoke. I walked slowly toward my wife's house, rehearsing lines under my breath. A passerby gave me a strange look, but I didn't care. For once, I was not ashamed of being heard. I arrived. The table was set. The voices of Olivia and Grant already filled the room. My wife smiled at me with a tension I could see beneath her lipstick. I sat at the end of the table, placed my hands on the oak, and listened. The salad made its round. The wine poured. Olivia launched into a story about a disastrous client call. Grant interrupted her with a joke. laughter, all as usual. But inside me, the metronome ticked, steady, waiting for me to enter on my cue. Not yet, but soon. They called me dramatic. I call it oxygen. The first breath after surfacing burns. It always does. But it is still breath. Do you know that feeling when you realize you can stand without asking the chair for permission? Part 4 is easy to summarize and impossible to forget. I stood. I said, I will not sit at a table where I'm invisible. This will be my last meal with you. These gatherings do not work for me. Then I left. The door closed behind me with that precise, unforgiving click of a lock settling into itself. I ate at the bar with Charles, and nothing was forgotten on my plate. That's it. A small gesture. A cataclysm. The aftershocks arrived Monday morning, echoing off the kitchen tiles of 2 different houses. My wife called first. The pause on the line was not the usual delicate pause of diplomacy. It was the loaded quiet of a courtroom before the foreman speaks. You humiliated me, she said. I told the truth, I answered. Humiliation is a reflection problem. You blindsided us. You had a group chat debating whether I wanted a plate, I said. I think the blindfolds were off. She accused me of cruelty. I countered with precision. That was our new language. Not intimacy, but indictment. An hour later, Olivia texted me privately. We're sorry you had a moment last night. We'll try to be more mindful. Attached, a cartoon rabbit offering a flower. The tone was diagnostic, condescending. A patient, not a person. Grant chimed in. You really put Mom in a tough spot, man. No need to make it a whole thing. I didn't answer either. Silence, I discovered, is sharp when wielded on purpose. That afternoon I did something both petty and practical. I audited the small subsidies I'd been providing for years. Streaming services, museum memberships, landscaping bills. A quiet drip of generosity no one had ever named aloud. One by one I clicked cancel. It felt like pruning. Revenge disguised as housekeeping. By evening, I stood in my kitchen with no appetite. The rain ticked against the window. The radiator exhaled, and the metronome I'd bought in Beacon Hill ticked steadily on my desk, keeping me alive. Tick, tock, a measured heartbeat. I wound it again, just to hear it. And then came Dorothy's letter. At Morrison and Blake's office on Tremont, they slid me an envelope, heavy and velvet, with my name typed full, not abbreviated. For the day he needs to be seen, the attorney said, quoting Dorothy. Inside, Elizabeth's old locket, the gold worn soft from years against her skin. I hadn't seen it since the hospice days. Inside the locket was a photograph of us on that Cape porch, her laughing, me squinting against the sun. On the opposite side, tucked under felt, was a small brass key, and beneath the felt, even smaller, a folded slip of paper, a number, 5 digits, and the name of a bank Elizabeth and I had once visited together. Do you feel the shiver? I did. The next morning, I walked into that bank with my passport and her death certificate. The vault manager examined the key, cross-checked the number, and then led me down into the belly of the building where the air smelled of metal and caution. He opened a box the length of my arm. Inside, documents, neatly stacked in Elizabeth's hand. At the top was a letter. William, love, you were always enough for me, but I feared the world would not treat you that way. I saved what I could. If you are reading this, it means I'm gone and Dorothy has judged you ready. Do not waste this on those who cannot see you. Use it to steady yourself. Use it to be heard. Below that were account statements. Investments, conservative, but patient. A sum larger than I had imagined she could squirrel away. Years of careful ledger work. Her invisible loyalty, now a weapon in my hand. I closed the box, thanked the manager, and walked back into the Boston daylight with my knees trembling. I was wealthier than my stepchildren had ever suspected. Wealthier, even, than my wife knew. What does a man do with unexpected power at 67? I'll tell you what I did. I drafted a will. Charles recommended a lawyer, discreet and unflappable. In her office on Boylston, I spelled it out. Not a cent to Olivia or Grant. Not one dime of Elizabeth's hidden hoard would go to the children who mocked me in group chats and left my plate empty. Instead, I named beneficiaries who would never expect it. A scholarship fund in Elizabeth's name. My old friend Charles, a modest gift to the piano teacher who patiently endured my fumbling fingers. And yes, a portion to my wife, but with stipulations. She would receive it only if she accepted, in writing, the terms of my independence. The liar asked if I was sure. More sure than I've been of anything in years, I said. When Sunday rolled around, I went to dinner one last time. Not to eat. I'd filled myself earlier at the trattoria in the North End, where strangers laugh too loudly and no one forgets your order. No, I went to deliver the finale. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic. The table gleamed, as if polished to blind me into civility. Olivia and Grant were already there, pouring wine, talking over each other. My wife looked relieved to see me walk in. She thought my presence meant surrender. I sat at the far end, as always. I let the chatter roll over me for 10 minutes. Olivia showed photos of her weekend getaway. Grant bragged about his latest deal. The potatoes did their orbit. And then, when my plate was once again left empty, I cleared my throat. I won't be coming to these dinners anymore, I said, calmly. But I thought you should know. I've written my will. That silenced them faster than any slammed door. I looked at each of them in turn. None of you need to worry. You will not inherit the burden of pretending to care for me. I've left everything elsewhere. To those who saw me, not those who erased me. Olivia's mouth fell open. Grant stammered something about fairness. My wife whispered my name like a warning. I stood. I placed Elizabeth's locket on the table, the gold catching the chandelier light. This belonged to someone who never forgot my plate, I said. And with it, she remembered me in ways you never could. I turned, walked out into the Boston night, and did not look back. That was months ago. Now my Sundays are mine. Sometimes I sit with Charles at the bar. Sometimes I carry takeout up to my apartment and eat in front of a ball game. Sometimes I wander into the North End and let strangers fold me into their conversations. My wife? She still calls. Sometimes we meet, just the two of us, in gentler spaces. She has begun to understand that love is not measured by how loudly her children laugh near her. Whether our marriage survives is an open question. But for once, it is my question too, not just hers. As for Olivia and Grant, they have grown polite. Too polite. They call occasionally, testing the waters. But I keep the distance steady. They suspect what I've done. They know, at least, that the inheritance they assumed would one day fall into their laps has slipped away. They will receive nothing from me but the memory of the night they finally saw me, and that is enough. Because here's the truth. Revenge is not fire and brimstone. It is not shouting. It is not spectacle. Revenge is a quiet dinner of your own choosing, paid for with money no one expected you to have, savored in the knowledge that you no longer beg for a seat at someone else's table. Revenge is dignity, served warm. And if you are listening, if you have sat with an empty plate while others pretended you weren't there, hear me. Do not wait. Build your own table. Write your own will. Make them see you, if only by walking away. That is the cost and the gift of being alive this long. Thank you for staying with me and listening this far. Your attention is a gift. Did these minutes mean something to you? Then please, follow the channel. Thanks.